Welcome to After the Homily with Father Daniel Scheidt. I'm Dr. Chris Stroud. Have you ever had questions after the homily? I know I do all the time. Have you ever wished that you could pull the priest aside and find out why he talked about this thing or that thing, or why he didn't talk about the thing that you really wanted him to talk about? Well, this is the podcast for you. We cover everything from literature to politics, church teaching to church architecture. And it doesn't matter if you're one of those everyday Catholics, Christmas and Easter, or maybe you can't remember the last time you went to Mass Catholic. We're here, and this podcast is for you. Father Daniel Scheidt is the pastor at St. Vincent de Paul Catholic Church in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in the Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend. Father, welcome back.
Great to be here, Christopher.
Great to be here as well. Here we sit the day after the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, and mathematically, I guess, we're almost halfway through Advent.
We are approaching the midpoint, which answers the great mystery of why the third candle on the Advent wreath is a different color. Of course, we don't call it pink, we call it rose. When I was a little kid, I always wanted the rose-colored candle to be the last one because in my childlike imagination, well, that's the one that's closest to Christmas. But it's the third one because we've reached the midpoint. So the rose candle indicates that we're halfway there. And the color is actually the color of the dawn, the rising sun. Nice. So the morning sky is a rosy-fingered dawn, as the poet Homer would call it in the Odyssey. And it indicates that Jesus Christ, the light of the world, is ready to dawn on our horizon to scatter our darkness. His coming is near.
Like everything in this amazing thing called the church, there's a reason.
Exactly.
That's beautiful.
Exactly.
Now, maybe this is illegal. We started doing this in my family recently. We light our Advent candle at dinner. We tend to have lengthy dinners. And if you light the same candle, it's gone by the time you get through. So we
rotate the purple ones. There's no regulation.
Good. There's no penalty for that.
No,
excellent.
No, not at all.
Excellent. Well, on the eve of Christmas, so to speak, as we reach the halfway point, I thought we could spend some time talking about Advent as preparation. You know, for Christmas, we have these two big prep seasons, Advent and Lent.
The purple seasons.
Right. And I think it's fair to say a lot of people struggle in their preparation for Christmas. I know personally I can find myself sitting at the Christmas Eve Mass thinking, it's happened again. I didn't get ready. I didn't get emotionally and spiritually prepared. And now I'm sitting here at 11 p.m. thinking about everything besides Christmas.
Yes.
Give us some advice. How do we not do that? How do we have a better Advent for the 2 weeks that are remaining and a better Christmas Mass as a result?
Yes. I think it requires prior planning, both in November, the month in which we consider the last things, and also planning right now for what we need the 12 days of Christmas to look like for us. So Advent typically, even though there are 4 candles on the Advent wreath, and some years there's the full 4 weeks of preparation, because Christmas doesn't fall on a particular day of the week on any given year, or the same day of the year, same day of the week in any given year. It means that sometimes Advent will be even shorter. It could be like 3 weeks and a day. So it means that we have to prepare for the season of preparation so that that season of preparation can become a fruitful one. So some people do their holiday decorating, for example, Thanksgiving or earlier, to think in terms of what we need to do in the reordering of our spiritual life and to plot that out for how it can look during the weeks of December. That would be a great way to prepare for Christmas. But right now, I love the idea of just thinking through how we can enjoy the gift of December 25th to January 5th or 6th, the 12 days of Christmas, because that's when the church's celebration really begins.
Is it correct in times of old, many traditional Catholic families, you didn't put any decorations up until Christmas Day?
Exactly.
For
That is also
reason.
true at the St. Vincent's Rectory. We had one ornament a day, each day of Advent, and it's one labeled, December 1st, December 2nd, etc. And then we decorate the tree Christmas Eve.
Yeah, and I think that's true in the gathering space tree as well. It's
Exactly.
not decorated because that's when the celebration actually begins.
Exactly.
On the date of birth or the day we celebrate. But it can be difficult. And December is a busy liturgical month. There's
Yes.
we just had Feast of the Immaculate Conception. There are many holy days. It's such a busy time. It can be tough to slow down and not be taken in by all of it.
So whatever the commitments that we've traditionally made, so there's a discernment there, and for every outside commitment, we should also be doing some interior commitment to prayer and resting, relaxing in the Lord, and that could be as simple as just prioritizing turning out the lights in our home at night rather than watching the gadgets, and listening to music that actually helps us prepare for Christmas. It can mean extra time spent in church, praying before the Lord and the Blessed Sacrament. But we intentionally prioritize that. So if we have several hours at Uncle Fred's house that we always do in the weeks before Christmas, well, we schedule the same amount of time, perhaps, in those activities which recenter us in what's most important for our spiritual life.
Because, it just seems like such an understatement to point out that this season has become so secular and so commercialized. It's next to impossible not to encounter that and not to be swept up in it.
Yes. But on the other hand, I also think that as things become more secularized, there are just fewer cultural reference points and expectations. So why not just be more intentional about it? What I personally benefit from, I look over the past year, so in this case, I look over 2024, and I ask the Lord to identify who are the people in my life that I've wanted to reconnect with, I've needed to reconnect with, and to use the 12 days of Christmas as the time to do that, so that with the ending of the old year, the beginning of the new year, there are no regrets. I've prioritized what's most important, and it's those meetings, those get-togethers, mainly for supper, for example, that are just so delightful. It's like I've been given extra days for new good things, and it redeems my negligence that may have crept in earlier in the year.
Well, from your perspective, why do you think so many people struggle with, I would say euphemistically, the demons of Christmas, that Christmas can bring such discontent and bring up old memories that are not good and old wounds in relationships?
Chris, I think it's summed up in the one verse from O Little Town of Bethlehem. And I say this all the time to penitents in the confessional. The line is, "The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight." It is precisely because Christmas is so poignant and formative for our hearts growing up, for most of us,
Right.
that this time of year, we just instinctively go there. And all the layers, so all of Christmas past,
Good and bad.
they're present, like rings on a tree.
Yeah.
And so it can be just even at the psychological level, the level of our memories, like a time machine where we go back, and perhaps some of the good memories, even the most beautiful memories of our childhood, we can have a sense of loss. They're gone.
Yeah.
Or the things that have most injured us, that have been the really agonizing points of tension, in our families and our friendships, those can come back to us. And then, of course, as we get older, many of the people with whom we've celebrated Christmas have now gone to meet the Lord. And if we don't go deeper into what Christmas is, namely opening the gift of Easter, if we don't do that, we will get trapped in the wrapping paper, and we will get confined in a very narrow box of nostalgia, of unfulfilled expectations, and it won't be a Merry Christmas. On the other hand, if we realize Christmas exists for Easter, and to open the deepest, realest Christmas gifts requires me to engage with the passion, death, and rising of the Lord, well, then Christmas becomes a very adult feast as well as one for children. And I think the adult instinct, there's a lot of good to work with, because when we give gifts, we want to pass on the goodness that we've received, and perhaps the things that we weren't given, or the negatives in our life, we don't want to pass those on. But very consciously appropriating that Christ was born at Bethlehem precisely to enter our carrying of our crosses. He's been born at Bethlehem precisely to die into our lives and losses. And he's been born at Bethlehem in that cave to rise from the dead from another cave. The one who was placed in the swaddling clothes was that so that he could be placed in the burial clothes. And he had his mother Mary there at Bethlehem, so that Mary Magdalene could be there at the resurrection. And he had Joseph of Nazareth over the Holy Family, so that Joseph of Arimathea could take care of the corpse. Joseph of Arimathea, Jesus' funeral director. And the very angels that heralded glory to God in the highest are the angels also there at the empty tomb, saying, he's not here, he's risen, and makes of those who would follow Jesus from Bethlehem to Jerusalem and beyond, evangelizers. I mean, the only reason we can celebrate Christmas is because Jesus' first friends witnessed him risen from the dead. Like, Christmas would not exist without Easter. And it's just a whole different way of thinking about it.
Sure.
But there is no way to the birth of Jesus except by way of his death and resurrection.
It's interesting from just a calendar management perspective that the two most important days of the year are so close together, with that whole thing called ordinary time in between.
Yes.
But I like the way that you said that. Christmas is just a journey that ends in Easter.
Yes.
And without one, there's not the other.
And the celebration of Christmas actually grew out of the church's celebration of Easter.
I don't know that it's new. I know that it's not new, but it seems more prevalent on social media maybe this year. These claims that, I'll summarize poorly, but essentially that Christians made up Christmas, that this is actually a pagan holiday, that they got carjacked. Explain some of that and how that is wrong.
Yeah. It's wrong at multiple levels. But let's start at a really interesting level at which it's wrong. So it presupposes that the pagan world is just completely lost and has nothing good. Well, the pagans were human beings like you and me, and they had deep desires like you and me, and some of those desires led them to yearn for the fulfillment of their longings. So behind every pagan feast there is some desire that is actually worth just examining. And it's not a question of saying that it's 100% good or even 100% bad, although there were practices in various pagan cultures that were clearly demonic. So the sacrifice of infants, for example, that is demonic.
Yeah.
But that aside, so on the pagan calendar, when one celebrates the feast of Sol Invictus, the Latin for the invincible sun, S-U-N, well, that actually strikes me as being interesting for human flourishing, because in our part of the world, in the Northern Hemisphere, there's a time of the year when things get really dark and really cold, and the days get really short in terms of daylight. And actually to have some type of observance that, we're moving toward this, and then, we've reached the darkest day, and now the light emerges. Well, I think that's worthy of some type of human celebration.
Sort of the winter solstice idea. We've reached the peak.
Right.
Now we're going to the other side.
Right. Which gets us to this concern about Christianity and paganism.
Yeah.
I suppose if somebody thinks that Christianity should have just dropped fully formed into, I don't know, some type of earthly vacuum, but like some meteor from outer space that comes down, you might be able to start complaining about how the human race was doing things beforehand. But the Catholic view is that the Lord has been preparing his people for centuries, millennia, for the coming of the Savior. And, as Aristotle says, not everyone who aims for the good is going to fall entirely short of the mark. And so when the Christians, like Paul preaching in the Areopagus, is trying to find some points of similarity, in this case, the worship of the unknown God, and trying to move from there to Christ, the resurrection, that attempt to find some type of redeemable goodness in these different feasts that could actually be transformed and, so to speak, won over for Christ, that strikes me as a very noble and good thing to do. I should also add that even deeper than Christians trying to co-opt the Roman calendar's feast of Sol Invictus, is their deeper desire to observe the incarnation of the Lord, which in the minds of the early Christians was inseparable from Christ's gift of his life in his sacrificial death on Calvary. So obviously, what we now know of as Good Friday moves. That's a movable feast. But the early church, for March 25th, during the time of the Passover, many years, acknowledged the feast of the Annunciation, Gabriel coming to Mary, you're going to conceive and bear a son. And Dr. Christopher Stroud, who delivers babies for a reason, what's the ordinary time that a baby spends in the womb?
About 10 months. Yeah.
Or in this case, 9. For
I said about.
About March 25th to December 25th. So the 9 months of the pregnancy, the church has seen as, well, yeah, that's why we celebrate Christmas on December 25th, because we celebrate the conception of Jesus on March 25th.
Wow.
So anyway, but now, like 10 months? Really?
Well, it's a common source of confusion because
I actually want to hear this. Normally, I do most of the talking during these podcasts.
and we don't
but
talk about pregnancy usually, but we can make an exception.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, this is good trivia for your family dinners at
Please.
Christmas. But so one's due date is actually 40 weeks, and so that would be 10 months, right? But the due date is actually a due range of probability from about 37 weeks to about 42 weeks.
Okay.
And it's just a statistical sort of bell-shaped curve, right? And 40 is the peak time. So it just happened with generations of people going around seeing, gosh, you're in labor. When was the first day of your last menstrual period? And writing it down and then realizing, on average, this is how long human pregnancies tend to last.
So why in the popular imagination is it 9 months?
I really
of
don't know
pregnancy?
where, because 9 would be 36 weeks, which would be somewhat early. But it probably
Because people would find out
right.
later.
And there's this confusing thing to make it more confusing. We date in the world pregnancies on what's called menstrual age, from the first day of the woman's last menstrual period.
Oh, okay.
But she was not pregnant on the
Sure.
first day. But presumably there would be no way to know when the woman conceived. One could know when the first day of the last period was. So this causes many a father concern when his daughter says, I'm 4 weeks pregnant, and the father says, but gosh, you just got married 2 weeks ago.
Sure.
How does that math work? We date that way. We date 2 weeks backwards, you might say, which is confusing.
No, but it's fascinating too.
But there's a lot of folklore around that. But it's actually 10 months is the due date.
But wait a minute. So at this very moment, you are actually helping me, and if my parents are tuning into this podcast, to understand my own birth. I was very late. And at a certain point, my dad just got ticked. Because, I think he waited the 9 months and then was
What's going on?
told it'll be a few more weeks.
Yeah.
And I just wouldn't come out. And he just reached a point where he was so anxious he couldn't stand it anymore. Like, bah.
This is a great source of anxiety, confusion.
Yeah.
One could argue bad medical decision-making over anxiety. But it's a fascinating thing. Every pregnancy ends. And I don't know if you have a favorite Christmas movie. I'll bet you do. But mine is the movie The Nativity, which it's older, and it's actually produced by HBO, which is maybe shocking. But there is this line when Mary is on the donkey and they're riding, and she says, my time is upon me. And this idea that the time, it started ticking, and it's in that window of time, 36, 37, 40, 41 weeks, but the time just starts. And it's always amazed me, one of the things that you and I as men will never, ever experience is that sense that the time is upon me, that something is happening, there's a baby coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, just miraculous.
Oh, so beautiful.
That movie, if we're plugging movies, I just think is terrific. And in a lot of ways, I love the actual birth of Christ because it does a great job of showing how chaotic things would have been for the census. And it was just wild. And despite all of that and the panic that Joseph couldn't find his laboring wife a place, suddenly everything gets very quiet. And it's just beautiful and quiet, the way the best births are. I love that. The other great thing in that movie is the birth of John the Baptist. When Elizabeth gives birth, it's very authentic. And you can't find a very authentic birth in most movies. But hers is very authentic and really quite beautiful.
You speak with authority, not like the scribes and Pharisees.
So look that movie up. It's
Sure.
old HBO Nativity. Do you have a favorite Christmas movie?
Do you know, there are movies that have imprinted themselves on my imagination, but I haven't watched TV for so many years.
Right.
I'm not a good, reliable source. But when you ask me the question, I hear it in terms of what movie I would recommend people to watch at Christmas time. And this is going to sound really bizarre, but let me explain. The movie of Mitch Albom's book, The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, which I think is the best visual interpretation of what Catholics would understand as purgatory. And it is the redemption of the hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. And when they're met in us and we just feel inadequate and the losses in our life are irrevocable and the things that we got wrong are irredeemable, the hope that movie dramatizes of the ability of the Lord to tie up the loose ends and to bring to fulfillment lives, situations, consequences of bad situations that weren't put together. It strikes me as a very profound way to enter the mystery of Christmas. And I think it takes with utter seriousness how the evangelists describe the events of the Lord's nativity, because anybody who knows the full story, and most people as they come to the scriptures, they know how it ends. Every detail of the account of Christ's birth is pregnant with his passion, his death, his resurrection. And so I think when you have done the binge watching of all the standard lists of Christmas,
which I think is a common tradition.
Movies, all the binge watching, a great way to not just cleanse the palate, but actually to consume something delicious and nutritious is the 5 people we meet in heaven.
Yeah, the whole time you were describing that, I kept sort of hearing the word hope.
Yeah,
that Christmas it's the ultimate hope that's realized in Easter.
Yeah,
and it's popular now to think that our world is a mess and these are the worst of times that have ever been. Back to that movie, The Nativity, they do a great job of depicting this was a messy time.
Yes,
not a great place to be. They
Yes.
were impoverished. They were oppressed. It was terrible.
Well, the amazing thing about this movie and the book by Mitch Albom, The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, as I remember it, it's been a number of years now, is that there's not a single mention of Christ that I know of in that work of art. It really is more of a parable, but it's shot through with this transcendent redemptive will that actually enters the complexity and just the horrific tragedies of the protagonists, the people. And I think people can have a disconnect between the proclamation of the Nativity, Christ born in Bethlehem, and the complexity of their own life. And it could be tempting to want to just stay at the level of sentimentalism and, oh, isn't the baby cute? And, oh, it's a children's feast because they get to open the new gifts, etc. Christmas, which, by the way, literally comes from Christ's Mass. We call it Christmas because it comes from the Mass. And at the heart of the Mass is the Lord's sacrifice. He gives his life. He lays it down to raise our life up so that we can share in the divine life. And if we're not teaching the next generation to enter those depths, we're actually not opening all the gifts that the Lord wants us to open this Christmas.
Wow. When you mention gifts, I think that's probably part of the source of frustration and the commercialism. Do you have advice for how adults approach the concept of gifting with Christmas in mind more authentically?
Well, we'll just do a little list. First, identify the people in your life who would most benefit from a gift. And then bring that list regularly to prayer. Like, Lord, Aunt Edna what do you want to give Aunt Edna through me? And that liberates us from the compulsive buy, or the addictive, just grabbing for things. The second thing that should be asked is, well, maybe it's not a consumable object, or maybe it's not an object that somebody else has made. Maybe it's something that we can make. And obviously something like baked goods. And to give those at different times in the year, because obviously we can be flooded now. You might just give as a Christmas present a little promissory note for freshly baked blueberry muffins in June. And then you put that on the calendar and you surprise the person with you actually fulfilling what you promised to do, the blueberry muffins in June.
Very nice.
I'd also say that people much prefer meaning to things. And in terms of the 5 love languages, so we've got words of affirmation, giving gifts, quality time, acts of service, physical touch. I'm a words of affirmation guy. But I think that especially people who might conversationally be challenged in saying, I love you, or this is what I cherish about you. I think a note that's written as the fruit of one's prayer. So like husbands, like when you go to the oratory of St. Mary Magdalene for your hour before the Lord, you can ask him, Lord, what do I need to write my wife so that she feels loved by me?
Yeah, because
Lord, give me the words, because I don't have the words. Lord, give me the words. And to have a letter, which is, an external objective reference point, that may actually be better than a thing, and it might actually be better than just more verbal words. It can be a keepsake.
Sure.
But the best gifts are the ones that give meaning rather than a thing.
Yeah. It can become so transactional. And I think, one of the most common scenarios that people despise is you suddenly show up at my door with a gift. And the first thing that pops into my head is not that, oh, how beautiful that is, but I didn't get you anything.
Exactly.
So we're imbalanced in our transaction,
right? Which
is pretty sad, but it's a very common response, I think.
Yes.
It's unavoidable.
Yes.
But I like the way that you said that. This is something that I'm giving you because I thought about you, not because I expect something in return.
And, the book isn't everything, and it might have its limitations, but the 5 love languages as a concept is quite fascinating, so that when we think of the people in our life and ask ourselves, of those 5, what does this person actually want to receive? What will give them the most joy? Words of affirmation, acts of service, giving gifts, that is things, quality time, physical touch. And we might have our own,
right?
But the people in our life might have something other than we're immediately comfortable with. So, for the Stoic husband, who's the man of few words, I just had a funeral where the children admitted that their father never said, I love you.
Oh, how tragic.
But the flip side is they knew it because he demonstrated it in his acts of service.
Oh.
He always showed up. So, for somebody like that, just to take an example, if somebody like that who never says, I love you in words, because it would be too awkward. If somebody actually just wrote on a piece of paper those words, just even a few sentences, even though my entire life I don't think that I've said this verbally to you, comma, I want you to know that every day and every hour of every day. I love you, Dad. Oh my goodness.
That's beautiful.
Like, the family would think it's an apocalyptic sign that, like, we're living in the end times. Jesus is going to come soon. And that's the point. Jesus wants to come in a way that's tailored to what is going to give us life and bring us joy. So all the suggestions that I've given are actually the fruits of prayer. I think most people never quite get to the point of praying about what gifts they'd like to give. It's either prompted by, as you say, the transactional, or just the itch to spend, and it isn't something received from the Lord as something to then give.
Yeah, it's funny. Recently, maybe on social media, I heard one of the Dave Ramsey people speaking sort of against the compulsion to buy adults gifts. If you had to feel compulsed, make it for children. But that, her point was adults don't need you to give them a turtleneck sweater.
Right.
But there are probably plenty of adults in our lives that could really use that letter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or the muffins.
And I will tell you this, if there are any beleaguered parents out there listening to this podcast, if I can give one transformative suggestion for your family life, do not let your children open all of the gifts on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, that is December 24th and 25th. Pace the gift giving and opening. Yeah. Because otherwise you're training the kids to be these crack addicts where they open the first one, they get the dopamine rush, and then they're off to the second one. And by the third one, they literally aren't even processing it. And then the binge is over. Everybody who's spent so much time looking forward to this is let down. The children are a mess. But if you say to the children, Christmas is a celebration that lasts many days. And so for each of the 12 days, we're going to open another present. That way, each gift is enjoyed for what it is. By the way, it also teaches the kids impulse control. And it takes the pressure off having to cram all the memories, all the goodness into one night. And I will offer one more reason to do this. And I never thought this through until I heard it from someone. I became very good friends in the beginning of my priesthood with the Comeau family. And rarely do I mention people by name, virtually never on the podcasts. But Josh and Rosary Comeau, they lived in Mishawaka. Josh was a firefighter. He was one of the funniest people to walk the planet. And at a certain point, he had a brain tumor that eventually claimed his life. He actually wrote a song to his dying cancer. So if you look up on the YouTube, Josh Comeau, Comeau, his song to my dying cancer is priceless. In any case, after Josh's death, I got a note from his wife, Rosary, and she thanked me for the advice for the gift giving over the 12 days of Christmas. And she said, Father Dan, because of that suggestion and our doing that, I had 12 Christmases each year, 12 Christmas celebrations with my husband and our children opening the gifts than I would have had we just opened the gifts on one day out of the year. Oh. So she she felt that she lived a lifetime of opening Christmas presents with her husband and children just because of that one shift in their life.
That's beautiful. I mean, the stereotypical thing is kids drowning in presents, adults drowning in presents.
Right.
It is sensory overload. It's easy to lose track of everything.
Yeah.
And then I think, too, part of the frustration maybe is we build up such unrealistic expectations in sort of an experiential way that it's bound to disappoint.
Yes.
Because it can't please.
Yes. And inevitably, of the 12 days of Christmas, some days are going to be louder, some quieter. Some are going to have more people, some less people. Some presents are going to be more immediately appealing to what I want. Some presents are going to be actually what I need. And to provide a way for parents and children to have that special time together and to understand this rhythm of expectation and fulfillment in Christ is it's just so beautiful.
Well, that is nice. And it would, if we took your advice, it would solve the dilemma that I know every young married couple is struggling with as they hear this and think about it. Where do we go on Christmas? Do we make your family mad, or do we make my family mad?
Absolutely. You just tell them 12 days of Christmas. And the first 8 days are considered by the church Christmas Day, just like the first 8 days of Easter are considered Easter Day.
Yeah.
Now, to young couples, my advice, in addition to pacing your gift giving over multiple days, is you should get a Christmas ornament for each other each year. And it should be something that reminds you of something really, really good or profound from that year. And you should label it Christmas 1974, whatever. When I was growing up, my grandma used to give each of the grandkids an ornament, and she would label it. And with each passing year, it was one of the greatest joys of my life to put the old ornaments on the tree. And so all of the goodness of the past was present, but every year it was something new. And there's another ring on the tree. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, so many ways to counter sort of the distractions of the materialism and the so many great ways.
Yeah. And even the song, The 12 Days of Christmas. I mean, go online for all of the backstory of that. I would simply offer one insight. As the days progress, you get new gifts, but you also receive the old gifts again in a new way, a new context. So on each of the 12 days of Christmas, you're getting the partridge in a pear tree. So for each of my Christmases as I grew up, I would put on the tree the first ornament I received from my grandma before I even knew what Christmas was. And I've tried to continue that as an adult I always ask the Lord to give me a Christmas card. And each year, the Lord is so good, He does. And I've collected them over the years. So I started doing this when I was an undergrad in college. And so I started in 1990. So this year will be the 34th Christmas card. And every year after the printer makes my new card, I go back to the box and I lay them all out.
And relive all of that.
I know, but that's the graced dimension of the hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. It's only in Christ that all time comes together to be opened as a gift.
I already feel better about my Christmas.
It's so good.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for all of that advice. It's a shame that they can be so difficult, but I think with just maybe a little change, a little prayer, we could start to see the hope.
Joy to the world, Christopher. The Savior reigns.
Well, Merry Christmas to you in the halfway through the Advent and a holy Advent, and thank you for all of this advice.
And to all a good night.
Viewers, listeners, thanks for joining us again for another episode of After the Homily with Father Daniel Scheidt. We hope that you'll join us for many other episodes. All of the episodes are available on the church's YouTube channel. If you just search After the Homily on YouTube, you'll find them all. We'd love to know what you think about this episode. We'd love to know what you'd like to hear in future episodes. You can reach us at church@stv.org. That would be great. You can reach me directly if you'd like, 260-450-8878. We'd love to hear from you. We hope you'll like and share and subscribe this with everyone you know. What a great Christmas gift having them share these episodes with friends and loved ones. We look forward to being back with you soon with another episode of After the Homily with Father Daniel Scheidt.